I ranked the best 3 loot frames for solo play based on cold, hard data. Let's get into it. Remember, if you like the Warframe content and want to help me out, make sure to leave a like on this video. The last few days I've spent coming up with a way to test which of the most commonly used loot frames is best for solo play. While you might be familiar with the regular loot survival setup of 2 Nekros, 1 Khora and 1 Speed Nova, I wanted to see how I could max the loot I was getting while playing solo, as solo play has one main advantage compared to group play, which is the ability to pause your game. But I also know that quite some people might play solo, and starting out in Warframe, it's important to get as many resources as you can for crafting frames, weapons, and in general for growing your stash. I chose to compare Khora, Hydroid and Nekros in 2 settings. Exterminate, which served as a proxy for shorter missions in which you aim to reach extraction quickly, and Survival, in which you aim to stay for longer and kill as many enemies as possible for maximized loot. For testing, I chose to use Oxomoko and Mod in the Void. For Exterminate missions, I kept the weapon loadout the same and only switched the frame. My main way of progressing through the level was by using the Kuva Brahma on all 3 frames. I rarely used the Grimoire for energy regen and my melee if I ran out of ammo. For the companion, I was always using a Diriga with Tenacious Bond and the Vulcax with the Vigilante set mods. To rank the frames, I kept track of the following: resources, mods, credits, endo, and for Exterminate, the time it took to complete the mission. In Survival, I made sure to always stop killing enemies after the in-game timer showed 5 minutes, after which I ran to the extraction. I repeated each mission 5 times on each frame before averaging and normalizing the results for the subsequential ranking. I do want to point out that I was running both a mod booster, a resource booster, as well as an increase to resource drop chance booster while doing these experiments. For ranking the frames, I chose to award 1 point per resource category in which they gained the most resources. And for Exterminate, I included the average mission time. If a frame got 2nd place, they got half a point, and if they got last, they got 0. With that explained, let's start off by going over the Exterminate mission type with the highly regarded loot daddy of Warframe, Nekros. Nekros is Desecrate, rerolls enemy drop tables after they die, and is able to do this multiple times when enemies are split up into multiple parts. For the Nekros build, I used the following. The main downside of Nekros was that Desecrate was quite slow to trigger, meaning I had to do a lot of backtracking for additional loot that spawned. This slowed down the mission a lot and completely tanked the resources per minute I was getting on average. Then, for Hydroid, I used a build with maximized range and high efficiency for spam casting and refreshing his 4th ability. Hydroid is able to double the percentage drop chance with his Pilfering Swarm augment, which affects enemies grabbed by the tentacles of his 4th ability. I must say that Hydroid already felt a lot smoother as I was spam casting his 4th ability for additional loot, and I did not have to wait around for very long, as the percentage drops were doubled immediately on enemy death. Finally, for Khora, I used this build, which is very similar to the Hydroid build, based on high range and efficiency. Khora functions in the same way Hydroid does. By her Pilfering Strangledome augment, you can increase the percentage drop chance to a fixed 65% extra, which is lower than Hydroid's. But Pilfering Strangledome has the benefit of not being affected by line of sight requirements. As long as enemies are grabbed by the dome, which can happen through walls, drops will be increased and damage dealt to enemies will be increased by another 200%. Furthermore, Khora's passive increases movement speed, which made the Exterminate runs go a lot smoother. When we look at the results, we can see that Hydroid and Khora were on top for most of the resource categories, with Nekros severely underperforming due to his slow loot rerolls and slower mission times. When looking at the rankings for this first leg of the head-to-head comparison, Hydroid actually took the lead with 8 points, followed very closely by Khora with 7.5 points, but my god was Nekros surprisingly bad, with a measly 1 point coming 2nd in 2 categories of resources. Being severely disappointed in the loot legend, I quickly set my sights on testing survival missions, where I was expecting him to do a lot better. In Survival, I used the following builds for each of the frames. For Khora, I used a build mainly made for camping in a single room, and I used Varuna's Helminth ability, together with Equilibrium for energy sustain. Hydroid was a bit of a hybrid, as I had to move around to get enough energy to sustain my Pilfering Swarm spam. This build was mainly focused on armor strength cantrip and high ability damage. For the Helminth ability, I used Roar to further double down on the ability damage. For Nekros, I used the same build as before, but I made sure to make all of my kills with a melee influence harmony, modded towards slash damage so I could trigger dismemberment for increased loot. In the survivor round, the battle became a lot closer. If we look at the data, we can see that Nekros now has closed the gap in a lot of categories, benefiting from the mission type, where movement through the map is more limited. And he even took the top spots in a couple of categories, especially for Endo. If we look at the ranks for survival, it was a lot closer, with Khora at 6.5 points, Nekros at 6 points, and Hydroid only at 2.5 points. If we then combine the earlier scores from Exterminate, we end up with Khora scoring the most points overall with 14, Hydroid in second place with 10.5, and surprisingly Nekros being the lowest for general loot across mission types with only a score of 7. However, as I just illustrated, roles of Nekros and Hydroid apparently swapped in both mission types, with Nekros underperforming in quick missions and Hydroid potentially underperforming in endless mission formats. In the end, I must say that by the data and also from my own anecdotal experience playing this game for a long time, Khora has to be the best overall loot frame for solo loot, purely because of her ease of use. However, I do understand that Nekros can be even easier, as his Desecrate ability can be a cast and forget ability. But if your main goal is resources, you may want to reconsider picking him for exterminates or captures. If you want to go through the data yourself and maybe add on to it with your own datasets, feel free to do so in the linked Google Sheet in the description. Here at the end, I want to mention some things that I didn't discuss in the video. One of them is the use of Ripkas, and especially the Amalgam mod for the Ripkas. This gives you 100% gore chance and is able to increase the loot dropped by Nekros' Desecrate. However, from some of the limited testing I have done, I did not find any significant difference in using the Ripkas on the Exterminate build where I was killing enemies with the Brahma. However, I did find another interesting interaction with the Ripkas, which I will cover in a future video. Furthermore, I know that Nekros is able to desecrate some special enemies like Eximus units or Thumpers on the plains of Eidolon. Nonetheless, I think these are a little bit too specialized, and if you are just running normal star chart missions, Khora will serve you the best. Let me know what you think is the best solo loot frame in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a subscribe for more Warframe content coming your way. I want to thank all of you for tuning in, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.